Hello and welcome to Cinema to the Letter. This episode is the Atypical film, known as Best in Show. On Cinema to the Letter, we break down the very nature of cinema, letter by letter. For each episode of a season topic, we cover 6 films that fit a C for classic, I for indie, N for new, E for egregious, M for masterpiece, and A for atypical. Because who doesn't love an acronym, am I right? I am Thomas, and I'm going to start doing something a bit different here. I'm recording this podcast while I'm wearing a Sherlock Holmes hat, and I've got a pipe in there, and just to really spice things up, I think it'll really work out.
You can maybe make it look like there's smoke coming out of the pipe or something. Hello, I am Bryan, and I'm Irish-German, like Robert Duvall in The Godfather.
Oh, yes. Now I want you to trot around the the way, Bryan.
Just once around, please.
Once around, please. But welcome, everybody, to the season finale of our SNL Vehicle season, in which, we like doing an A for atypical choice, and this was a curious one to kind of put together, Bryan, at least for me. When you think of, atypical SNL things, there's a lot of interesting choices you could go down. Like, for example, one that I had as a potential choice was Office Space, because that has a weird connection to SNL in that it started off as shorts that Mike Judge did, that were animated, that aired on SNL, and then years later became the movie. There's stuff like that. Or the really weird Billy Crystal vehicle, Mr. Saturday Night, which is his attempt at doing an Oscar bid movie that was based on a character he had performed in stand-up, but then also did on SNL. So it's tangential, but I saw that movie. That movie's fucking so strange. Because it's such an Oscar weepy, but it's also Billy Crystal doing a lot of his shtick. And I love the irony that, he tried it so hard to get Oscar nominations, and the only nomination that movie got was for David Paymer for Best Supporting Actor, who's very good in that movie, but just Billy got completely shut out. God. I just think it's really funny.
I feel like the atypical, one of the things we talked about was kind of SNL people doing either more quote unquote serious movies, more dramatic movies and stuff like that, which, is certainly atypical of SNL people for them to do the most obvious example, we talked about it, I think, many times throughout, but Adam Sandler doing Uncut Gems or something like that, I think.
Yeah.
Billy Crystal did that Apple TV show that was a thriller or something, and it was what the fuck is this? Certainly, yeah, there is that kind of thing, but yeah, we chose this, which I had heard of this movie, and I knew the title, and I knew some of the people in it, but yeah, you kind of pitched this one, so I'm curious, what about this one kind of made it stand out as the one we should probably cover here? I can think of a few obvious examples, but yeah,
Well, the reason I chose Best in Show, which we're covering today, is the subject of our episode, is the atypical, is mainly because it's atypical to think of many of these people as being SNL, adjacent. Because they all have, all the people who were cast members on SNL that are involved in this movie had very weird tenures. For the main person, of course, being Christopher Guest, who is the director and co-writer, though that's, as we'll get into, not a huge declaration point necessarily. There's a lot of co-writers technically on this very improvised movie. But Christopher Guest was part of this weird moment in SNL where, I think we've talked about this over the course of this season, but basically, after the Not Ready for Primetime players had left SNL by the end of the 1979-1980 season, Lorne Michaels left, and Dick Ebersol took over. He was portrayed by Cooper Hoffman in the film Saturday Night that you would have seen. And he took over for a couple years, and most of that period is known for its disastrousness, except for 2 big things. One, Eddie Murphy. That's the big thing. After a disastrous initial cast, which included some interesting figures like Gilbert Gottfried, was a member of that
Oh,
like initial
cool.
like 1980 cast. He didn't have a fun time. No one did. He got fired within a very quick amount of time because that era of the show was so fucking terrible. And then Eddie Murphy came in and really like lined up everything. But also during the last year that Dick Ebersol was involved, before Lorne Michaels came back and had the, as we previously mentioned, the disastrous season that had like Randy Quaid and Robert Downey Jr. and Anthony Michael Hall in it. There was this one year where, along with the regular cast members, like I think Jim Belushi was a cast member at this time, and Julia Louis-Dreyfus was a cast member around this time as well. Dick Ebersol decided to farm out this interesting experiment of hiring a few famous people to be on SNL for a single year contract. And those people were Christopher Guest, Martin Short, Billy Crystal, and Harry Shearer. Harry Shearer most would recognize from his collaborations with Guest on other movies, not this one, but he's of course part of Spinal Tap, and he later would go on to voice several characters on The Simpsons, which he has done for the past multiple decades, despite how much he is vocally not supportive of the show
Right.
many times, which is so funny. It's just like, dude, just shut up and get your fucking paycheck. You're one of the richest voice actors ever. Fucking shut up, Harry. But he was a part of this particular kind of cast, and this was like a big ratings boom for SNL this particular period. And it's notable because like Guest only was on this one particular year. Same thing with all four of those people. They were only on for the 1 year and then they left. And then Michael McKean is a really weird case where he was a host previously on SNL, like back in the 80s. Like the Spinal Tap characters appeared when he hosted the show around the same time as the movie came out. And also he appeared with Guest and Shearer as the Folksmen, which was a group of characters who would later go on to be spun off in A Mighty Wind, which is another one of the Christopher Guest documentaries. So that technically is an SNL sketch movie. Because they did like a little mockumentary series, and that's the big thing that Guest was like known for in SNL, from what I've seen, is that he would do a lot of like these mockumentary things that would kind of like feel like the early representation for like what would later come about with like his movies. Like there's a great one that isn't on YouTube for music rights reasons called Synchronized Swimmers, where it's Harry Shearer and Martin Short are trained to be synchronized swimmers for like the Olympics, but their whole gimmicks that they do synchronized swimming to like dumb pop songs or like the Indiana Jones theme, and they're doing stuff like they're putting their like hands above their like brows and looking around for like to the Raiders March, looking around while they're in like the fucking water. It's very silly. But yeah, in any case, so McKean had been involved in like some of those sketches when he hosted, but then he later became a cast member on SNL during the 1994-1995 season, which we talked about this last time, that's around the time that like Adam Sandler is involved. And like near the end of his tenure, he gets fired at the end of that year, along with Chris Farley and Michael McKean. And McKean was like a weird thing. Like he'd had a whole comedy career. He was 46 at the time he joined, which up to a point was like the oldest anyone had ever been when they became a cast member in SNL. He's the only person also who hosted SNL and then years later became a cast member briefly. It was also for only 1 year. And then the weirdest one, really, is Catherine O'Hara, who is more well known, along with Eugene Levy and some other people involved in this, for being on SCTV, which was a Canadian sketch show that I'm not as familiar with. I've seen some bits. It would like run on Comedy Central sometimes, and I liked what I saw. I just haven't like dug deep into that. But there was a point where they were on the edge of coming back on SCTV, so she signed up to be on SNL during that 6th season, which is the season where Dick Ebersol took over and everything was like a disaster. She was almost a part of that season, but she was only involved with for 1 week because she ended up resigning when she found out that SCTV got picked up for another season. So she's technically a cast member, but never was on the show.
Huh. Oh, that's so bizarre. Okay. Huh.
Yeah. So that's why I kind of chose as the Atypical, because these people aren't really known for being on SNL that much, I would say. And it is fascinating, though, because, like, I think Guest in particular is, like, what comes across from, like, the bits of his SNL tenure that I've seen is that, like, he doesn't really take over any sketch. He's very much, like, a supportive player. Like, one of the sketches I have on the playlist is one that's called The Contestant, which is where Martin Short comes in as his Ed Grimley character to audition for Wheel of Fortune. And Christopher Guest is the guy who's interviewing him. And Guest's only big comedy bit is, like, at the beginning of the sketch, he's writing out just, like, a thing that says, "I'm not enjoying my work anymore." He puts on his chest, he gets up, bumps into a boom mic, which a great bit of improvisation that's rare on SNL. So, like, he bumps into the boom mic on his head, and then he, like, gets up, but then looks up after a beat, and then just keeps going to the window where he's about to commit suicide. And then he gets a knock on his door, and then Martin Short comes in and he interviews him. And he doesn't. That's what I like about Guest in general in like his movies is that he isn't really the star. He really loves being a part of ensembles. He can be very funny, and he'll own certain scenes, but also it's very much his stuff on SNL is very much a prelude to his mockumentary stuff, where he has just like a bunch of great people improvising and doing fun shit.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that like we'll get into the cast of this movie, but like you're right. Like I don't as someone who like didn't really watch SNL, like don't associate like any of these people with being on the show at all, really. And like I know them obviously from like all the movies they've done, like, you know, outside of SNL. And so when you pitch this, I was like, oh yeah, it's not what I typically think of, but as you've kind of pointed out, like, yeah, there are those SNL connections, and like it's very interesting to see like this group of people, especially like, I'm sure we'll get into this, but especially like where a lot of these people are now. Like some of them are incredibly relevant, like as we speak. Like we'll get to like Parker Posey and, you know, stuff like that. Like it is just really fascinating to see like this group of people. It's a very weird group of people, but yeah.
Yeah, and we'll go ahead and jump into it now. Let's jump into Best in Show.
Live from Philadelphia, it's the 125th annual Mayflower Kennel Club Dog Show. 3,000 dogs competing for Best in Show. To think that in some countries these dogs are eaten.
That goal is that Best in Show ribbon.
Actually, poodle means puddle in German.
You want your busy bee?
Come get your busy bee. God damn it, if she doesn't get her toy, she's gonna flip out!
It's not in here. You left it at the hotel. Go to the hotel and get busy bee!
That's my favorite, the miniature schnauzer. You'd think they'd want to breed them bigger, wouldn't you, like grapefruits or watermelons?
Don't look at the fathead losers or freaks. You look at me!
He went after her like she's made out of ham.
So Best in Show came out September 29th, 2000. And as I mentioned, is directed and co-written by Christopher Guest. And this is one of his mockumentary films, which he's mostly known for. He has a very weird directorial career in general. Because prior to this, he had directed some stuff like there's this movie called The Big Picture, which stars a young Kevin Bacon and is about him trying to like get into the film industry after graduating from film school. There's his remake of Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, which was made for TV, starring Daryl Hannah, and it's a very interesting, odd movie. I would say not a great movie, but I watched that and the original movie for the first time, and I vastly prefer it to the original movie, especially because the original movie is 60 minutes long, and spoilers, she doesn't get actually big and like stomping around until the last 10 minutes of that movie.
Oh.
Well, yeah, it's one of those sci-fi movies. Yeah, where it's like a lot of people talk in rooms about like she's growing giant, and you see like a paper mache giant hand in like a room.
Well, I'm sure they'll fix that when they do the remake with Sydney Sweeney, right? And Edgar Wright is supposed to direct that. I don't know if that's still happening, but I remember that got announced a few years ago. Which, you know,
right?
Who knows about that?
I thought Tim Burton also got attached to a version recently as well.
Right. Oh yes, with wasn't like Gillian Flynn writing it as well?
Yes, I believe that was the case.
Which is very interesting.
I mean, either way, I think there's room for a modern 50-foot woman in the landscape. But yeah, so he does stuff like that, and then he did Waiting for Guffman, which is kind of the first of these movies. Though I should also note that he had directed a movie called Almost Heroes that was shot in like 1996 and didn't come out until 1998. Because of a lot of post-production problems, and also Chris Farley died in the middle of like that movie attempting to come out. It's his last movie, and Matthew Perry was also going through a lot of his drug problems, and they're the two stars of the movie. Yeah, that's a disaster of a movie, by the way. Terrible, awful movie. Very unfortunate. That's Chris Farley's last movie. But in the meantime, Waiting for Guffman was this kind of like a smaller hit that like really gained a lot of like cult attention, and that's a movie that's in a similar style to this, where it's basically about like a bunch of people performing a regional theater production to celebrate like the anniversary of this town in like the middle of nowhere, like Minnesota or whatever. And it's got a lot of the same people like Christopher Guest, Catherine O'Hara, Fred Willard, a lot of this like ensemble, Parker Posey. That was the first example of this. And then he did Best in Show and A Mighty Wind, which are considered kind of like his 3 like essential mockumentary movies, I would say. And after that he does For Your Consideration, which is kind of like the Hollywood satire version of one of these mockumentary movies that is not great. It's not terrible, but it's disappointing. And then also the Netflix one, Mascots, which is, I finally watched because I had avoided it for so long because I heard it was terrible. And it is. It's really fucking unfunny, and it's a bummer because a lot of the same people are involved.
Yeah, I had not heard of this. I looked it up when I was looking at Guest's filmography, and I mean, obviously it's a Netflix release, so, you know, it kind of just comes and goes, but...
One of the early ones, because that's 2016, so that was
right,
like really
yeah.
early in the Netflix movie run, yeah.
Yeah, and I had not heard of it, and, like, the cast looks kind of cool, you know? You've got, like, Zach Woods in here, Chris O'Dowd, but... yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so in any case, I had seen, like, a bunch of these movies, obviously. In particular, I'd seen Best in Show, like, I don't know, around in, like, college. And, I really loved it, and I still really love it. I think it's my favorite of Guest's movies, but you had no real exposure. Like, who is Christopher Guest to you before this movie, really?
I really don't think I knew who he was. I knew the name, and I had known Best in Show, and I think what I had associated him with was, like, the mockumentary, and I'd seen, like, you know, because, again, like, a lot of the people from this film have had this kind of resurgence in the past few years. People like Jennifer Coolidge, Parker Posey, both for The White Lotus, weirdly enough, actually.
Yes.
But, you know, so I had seen, like, clips and stuff back from the Twitter days, those halcyon days, of people
Salad
would just, like,
days,
post...
really.
Right. Would just post, like, clips and stuff, and so I'd been aware of this movie, and I knew that it was, like, about a dog show of some kind, I guess. Yeah, I really didn't know who he was. He's one of these people that I was just completely unfamiliar with his career, and going into this, I think, you know, there's a lot of people in this cast that I am familiar with and love, you know, that I was really happy to see in this. And I think this being in the mockumentary format, you know, which I have some familiarity with, I think mostly, though, a lot of the stuff that comes after this movie, obviously, like The Office and, like, you know, Parks and Rec.
We will definitely talk about how this movie was so royally cribbed by the Office and other things.
It's all I could think about. I was trying to think of, you know, while I was watching this, I'm kind of thinking, like, well, what is, like, you know, the history of the mockumentary? Obviously, you have something like Spinal Tap, which I've never seen, actually, weirdly enough. I think it's, like, one of those movies that's just not on streaming, like, it's not available. But
I mean, you gotta catch up before the sequel comes out later this year.
Right. Once again, we are just... the well is going dry on legacy sequel stuff, but that's a different conversation. But yeah, like, going into this, I was thinking, like, how this movie comes out right at the beginning of the 21st century and kind of feels very influential on just a lot of the kinds of mockumentaries that we see nowadays, right? Like, obviously, like The Office and stuff, but, you know, stuff like we talked about, Pop Star, the Andy Samberg movie,
yes,
or like What We Do in the Shadows, like all these kind of mockumentary style movies. This feels like it is kind of a big kind of influence and a big, like, kind of moment for those things to take influence from. But yeah, which I think is very interesting, and I think there's a lot of stuff that I think this movie does really, really well. That, again, yeah, we'll talk about The Office and stuff, and I like that show, but, like, you can see how stuff like The Office and stuff takes what this movie does and kind of makes it more annoying, I'll say. You know, like, that's not a very, like, analytical way of looking at it, but, like, a lot of stuff that this movie does, like, borders on being annoying in some way and never crosses that line, if that makes any sense, you know? And I think that's, like, yeah, we'll talk about a lot of, like, what makes this movie work as a mockumentary specifically.
Yeah, by the way, I would say, Brian, I think you know him from at least a couple things. 'Cause the weird thing, Christopher Guest has like a very odd acting career as well. Or before this, another SNL connection I didn't even mention. He was a part of the National Lampoon like stage show and radio hour with a lot of the not ready for primetime players like John Belushi, Chevy Chase, and Gilda Radner. So he's also another SNL connection that kind of has like the permutation pre-SNL kind of history there. But he also has weird acting credits, like he's in Death Wish, the original Death Wish, as a cop briefly. He also, I think the two places I would know him from the most is in Little Shop of Horrors. He's the guy who comes up to Mushnik's shop and says, "What is this strange and interesting plant you have in the window?" He's that guy.
Yeah, okay.
And then in The Princess Bride, he plays a six-fingered man who killed Mandy Patinkin's father. And I love that he can. One of the funniest bits in that great film movie is when Mandy Patinkin confronts him and does the whole like, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die." Christopher Guest just has his sword up and then just bolts, like just fucking leaves immediately. So we've had like some experience with some of these comedy things, but yeah, the mockumentary thing's really interesting because like I would say prior to this in terms of comedy, it's like not as robust, like especially pre-Spinal Tap. Because you've got stuff like the Albert Brooks movie Real Life, which I would recommend to anybody. That movie came out in 1979 and feels extremely relevant. It's literally about like Albert Brooks being a producer who's like, "Hey, I want to film a family going about their lives as a television show," which was ridiculous satire in 1979.
And now vlogs.
Right, exactly. But yeah, so with like Waiting for Guffin and stuff, I think that's what kind of creates this interesting thing where it's kind of at the teetering point, because a big thing watching the Christopher Guest documentaries, either for some of them, most of them rewatching them, and even like Mascots watching it for the first time, the big thing you notice, I think, is that he's kind of on the teetering edge because the major three ones are shot on film. So there's kind of this effect that makes it feel almost like an Errol Morris documentary.
Yeah.
Right, where it's like, oh, because you have like the film scratches and stuff. I think that adds to like what works about the movie for me personally, like these movies, because there's this kind of element of like, oh, this does feel like a found document of sorts of like these people that's like very time stamped. When you get to like For Your Consideration, and especially Mascots, when shot digitally, it just the humor doesn't nearly work as well. I think it becomes more kind of like the Office permutation, like we were mentioning earlier, where it feels, especially by Mascots, that was so owned by like that and Parks and Rec, that it just feels kind of like, oh, like somebody's trying to kind of go back to it and it doesn't work. Like trying to fit into an old pair of shoes and like they're not fitting, but they're insisting on walking in them. And it's like, oh, your feet are bleeding. Get out of those, man. This isn't a good idea. So can't wait for Spinal Tap 2. Especially, Rob Reiner.
He's on a hot streak.
Of the last, like, exactly. Yeah, it's so odd. And I think, but I would personally say, of the various guest documentaries, particularly those essential three, this is my favorite. I also would say it's most accessible. Given this is your first attempt at watching any of these, would you say it was quite accessible to you, Brian?
Yeah, that was one thing I was kind of not worried about necessarily, but like, with any like just not being aware of Guest really, and this being like an ensemble movie with like a pretty, kind of stacked cast, I will say. Like the cast in this movie is crazy, and there's some great like really really small like roles that like pop up here and there that are great. But yeah, I think it being like 90 minutes flat, the thing I love that this movie doesn't do is there's no sort of faffing about, as it were, of like, we just get right into like the documentary itself. And I think, like what you were saying about it being like shot on film, I think, yes, it makes it look like a real documentary, and it feels like a real documentary where they're cutting in between like the different families that we're gonna get, that we're gonna focus on, but also cutting back to like the preparation of the actual like show at the hotel or at the like wherever they are, for the actual like Mayflower Cup, and like I think the fact that it feels like a real documentary like really really helps. Like there isn't, gosh, I don't know how to explain it really, but like it helps kind of ease you into this by like getting you into the preparation of the show and the kind of like the setup for it, and like getting you kind of interested in like just these weird people and these weird like just their weird quirks, and we're going like everyone has some like something that distinguishes them from the other. I think that's another thing that's really like important here. And yeah, I think the fact that this movie is 90 minutes flat, it gets in, it gets out, like there's a short like very very short like epilogue at the end, and that's it. I think that like really helps this movie feel, I don't want to say overwhelming, but like it could be easy to be, I think, overwhelmed by this being like, especially the way that this movie is riffing on like just the pageantry and the like, you know, just the elegance of this event or whatever. But yeah, no, it's very easy, like digestible in that way. I think that like it goes down very very easily. It's also incredibly funny, I will say.
Yeah, it's very interesting with like kind of that's a recurring thing with Guest movies. Like the longest Christopher Guest mockumentary is A Mighty Wind, and that's 92 minutes long. So they're very easily digestible. I think that's a big thing. Even though I rewatched Spinal Tap, I always forget that movie's 82 minutes long with credits, which is fucking nuts. So I can't wait for This Is Spinal Tap 2 to be 150 minutes long, probably. Right. But yeah, I think with he knows how to like kind of get in, get out, which I think is what makes it work for like these movies that are inherently kind of like, you know, sketches. I think that's a big thing, like coming from like the sketch world. Like him kind of like spinning that off and like, oh, let me do movies. It's like, let me keep them short. Let me keep them tight. Like we don't want to like spend too much time and then we get kind of like bored of it or whatever. Which I think some of his documentaries, even the better ones, suffer from. I think that's my personal thing with A Mighty Wind, which I think is really good. But I still think at the same time, I don't know, that one gets a lot more praise, I think. It's kind of like the more beloved one. It's Oscar nominated for one of the songs, interestingly enough. But I think that one has, you know, just also as a factor of like, I'm not huge on folk music. And it's very much like a parody of like very specific folk musician stuff. And the songs are like almost too good. You know, they're not really like funny songs. Like Spinal Tap has funny songs, like Big Bottom, Sex Farm, shit like that. It's just like they're inherently funny songs, as opposed to like, it just almost seem like really good versions of folk songs in that movie that they spend a lot of sequences like playing them out. But it's still a very funny movie, still a very good movie. But I think, yeah, Best in Show, I think has a better kind of wrangle on like, oh, let's have, you know, very brief, and especially that like this one I think does the best job of like balancing the different storylines, which Christopher Guest at his best is kind of like, okay, we'll spend like a couple minutes with these characters, move on to different characters. And it's so weird because like the inherent thing with his movies is that there is no like complete script for them. Usually whenever he makes one of these movies, he has the actors improvise with just an outline that's like 16 pages long that just runs the basic beats of like the story has to go to here. Like there's an outline there, just run with it for this scene. And to that degree, there were apparently 60 hours of footage shot.
Oh, wow.
Which they ended up truncating into what we get here in the movie. So I'm curious, Bryan, with all these different storylines that are involved, like the basic plot of this movie is just a bunch of people go to a dog show and compete. Do you have a favorite?
Well, favorite couple or favorite dog? I feel like these are two.
That's true.
Separate.
I think dog is a different discussion. I'm more of your favorite of sort of like the different storylines that we get.
The storyline. I really like the Eugene Levy, Jennifer Coolidge, like their whole thing. I think just because
Catherine O'Hara,
yes, I'm sorry. Just because one, Eugene Levy is so good in this and is like every line he has is just like so funny and so amazing, and he is just doing some amazing stuff. Just also some great like recurring bits that I did not expect to recur, right? We get like these interviews at the very beginning with the couples talking about their dogs and their marriages, their relationships or whatever. And like the bit about like her saying like, oh yeah, I've been with hundreds, maybe hundreds of men. He's like, hundreds? I did not know that. It's really funny.
Well, yeah, the way like he says it was just like, oh, she had a couple suitors in her time, like dozens, like, and she's actually more like hundreds. Huh.
His reaction is so great. He's not like angry or anything. He's not surprised. He's just kind of like, an interesting bit of information I've learned. Like, it's so good. And the way that recurs just throughout.
Right, yeah. I will say that's not my favorite recurring joke in this. I think that might be my least favorite. It just feels kind of like, I don't know, it feels kind of repetitive. But at the same time, there still is like funny stuff. Like her and Larry Miller, I think, are very funny together. He's the guy who plays the her former flame, who like they stay at their house for the dog show. For a minute.
Great scene.
Right, very funny. But I think I don't know, it also feels like bordering on kind of like slut shaming about Catherine O'Hara. At the same time that it's like about the impotent like Eugene Levy, but I love Levy though, especially the joke early on was just like, she wanted to dance with me and I don't dance, I have 2 left feet. Of course I was very literal. Was born with 2 left feet and like that pan down to his
yes. It's so great. What I love about like them though is that like, yeah, there is a bit of that kind of, there's a few things in this movie that are a bit kind of like they're skirting on some lines, maybe crossing some lines, but there is like a real like sweetness to their relationship in a way like that I find so endearing, like especially compared to like Parker Posey and Michael Hitchcock. Like their conversations are really funny but are just like completely acidic, like just really awful people. I like that kind of like sweetness, especially like when they win. I don't know, there's something really like beautiful about like just kind of like their relationship, and I really like them. But are they your favorites, or do you have another one?
One thing I want to shout out with Catherine O'Hara, though, while we're still on her, the funniest thing she does in this movie is the bit where she falls over before the dog thing, and then she like, oh, it's just my knee, it's fine. And the way she wobbles around in like a circle is so fucking funny.
When she like when they win and she like walks up to the thing, and it's like that wide shot of the like the center, and it's just so funny seeing her walk up there.
Yeah. I don't know even if I find this couple like that funny. I think honestly one of the funnier people is Christopher Guest, as the Harlan character, who's very funny. But I think my favorite couple is Michael McKean and John Michael Higgins. The Shih Tzus, which is a weird thing because like I don't think they have like the best jokes, but like they're just an incredibly endearing couple that like honestly feels like I'm like most emotionally invested in them, even though they have like their obsession with the Shih Tzus is so funny, and their whole like going back and forth there's a lot of like great bits, especially like John Michael Higgins' outfits are so good. When he's like I have to go and change like the dog show is very
when he walks out with that blue suit, it is insane. It looks crazy.
Higgins is one of my favorite underrated like comedy actors.
He's
of course,
great.
He has one of my favorite bits in Walk Hard, just like, you have failed conclusively, and there is no evidence that you will change my mind in the studio.
He is
so fucking funny.
He's amazing in Walk Hard, and he's really good in the Pitch Perfect movies as like the like commentator announcer guy. Like those movies are kind of hit or miss a little bit, but like him and like I think him and Elizabeth Banks are the like announcers in one of them, and they are great together.
They're very funny, yeah, for sure. I think also very influenced by somebody who we needed to devote a lot of time to in this movie, who is, I think, the funniest person maybe ever in a movie. Fred Willard. We'll get to it. I think that's one of the funniest performances ever committed to film is Fred Willard in this movie. But yeah, I think like McKean and him, and that's what I really love also about like McKean at the same time. So like Higgins is obviously like playing a more like flamboyant character, but I don't think the movie's really talking down to him. They're admiring the fact that like these two are like very like silly together, but McKean is also like such a great character actor, and I think he plays like the genteel sweetness. Like when he's cheering on Higgins in the crowd, I really feel like the warmth coming from him, and it's especially for like 2000 with like a gay couple in a movie. It's so rare to find like something that actually feels invested. Well, maybe poking fun at them, it still doesn't feel like it's like, look at these two gay folks. Isn't it so fucking funny that they fuck each other, two guys? It doesn't feel like that at all.
Yeah, like there are definitely some jokes that are like playing on the fact that they are a gay couple, but one of the great things about this movie, and it's kind of it's the way that it treats the the Mayflower dog show as a whole, where it is both taking this with like genuine sincerity and like I don't know, like by the end of it when they're announcing the winner, like I was kind of into it. Like I'm kind of like very invested in this dog show, but also yeah, there's a bit of like poking fun, and that's kind of what I mean about like it's kind of skirting that line of like has this aged poorly, and I would say for the most part like not really, right? Like yeah, it does kind of portray them as like a bit silly and like ridiculous, but like so is everyone in this movie, and I agree, like they portray them as like a genuine couple, right? Like there aren't like necessarily jokes at their expense that badly. Like the closest I would say of that, and even then like is the sort of like Jane Lynch Jennifer Coolidge scene where they like kiss behind the thing, which is like it's like it's kind of taken as a joke but also not. I think it also is the interesting thing about this movie is like I don't know, there's kind of a interesting story happening there in the background of all this. You don't get a lot of like them necessarily, and so you're kind of like filling in the blanks, and there's a humanity to this movie, I think, which is really interesting, even though it is like again very absurd and ridiculous and very stupid at times. Like there is kind of a weird humanity here of like kind of in a weird like Errol Morris kind of way, right? Of like trying to find the sort of human core at the center of this story, and there's kind of like there's sadness there. There's a lot of like you know, like Parker Posey and Michael Hitchcock are ridiculous people, but also like I don't know, there is kind of a weird sadness to them in some way. It's like I don't know, it's a fascinating way that this movie's kind of like operating, which I just find it so interesting, the way that it's kind of handling all these different, handling the comedy and handling them as like genuine people at the same time.
Yeah, I would recommend, there's a great YouTube essay I watched recently from a channel called Too Many Tapes, called The Complicated Cruelty of Christopher Guest, that I think expresses a lot of this, where like his movies definitely are bordering between like kind of laughing at these people but also finding them very sincere.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so curious, and I think especially is like kind of frustrating about particularly I think his epilogues. Like the video essay goes into this a lot, that like the epilogues kind of feel like they almost deflate any kind of like happy ending for his movies. We'll get into, I think that's kind of the case with this one. I think it's very much the case with The Mighty Wind. I think that movie comes to like such an incredible, beautiful ending that is like so awesome, and the epilogue really deflates a lot of that joy for various reasons that have held up poorly.
Okay.
But that's a different discussion for a different day. But yeah, I think in this movie there's a better balance. Like even with like Parker Posey and Michael Hitchcock, I would argue, like you mentioned, they're very acidic as a couple. They are very toxic being around each other. But I think they do at least find like this incredibly human kind of like desperation between the two of them that I think feels very real, where it's like their marriage is crumbling and they're devoting all of their time to this dog show element of it. Like the movie opens with them at like the psychiatrist office, where they're just talking about like the great reveal, basically, just like, you know, she caught us, she opened the door and she caught mommy and daddy having sex, and you think like, oh, they're talking about their kid, and they look down and there's this dog laying on a little couch.
Parker Posey, you know, again, yeah, she's having a huge moment right now. I love that clip of her on like Good Morning America or whatever, where she was like, tsunami, Piper, no, like she's amazing. She has so many great lines in this movie, and in that, I think it's in that opening scene where she's just like, we had the Kama Sutra, and like she explains the position she was in, and it's so great. It's amazing.
But love the detail, they both have adult braces and it's never commented on throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, but again, I think it is that kind of thing of like, this movie is giving you, because it's 90 minutes, like you have to sort of fill in these blanks of who these people are, and I think, I don't know, yeah, just the weird fact that they have like adult braces, like there's something there. There's a kind of like humanity there to that, which I think, yeah, is so interesting.
Yeah, another person where I feel like that's very much like this kind of bordering thing is the character I mentioned, played by Christopher Guest, Harlan Pepper, who's this, I can't emphasize enough how Christopher Guest is so fucking good at accents. He's stellar because like his like the way he is, like he does a British accent for Spinal Tap. He does kind of like a Southern accent for Waiting for Guffin for his character. That's a bit, like on the Fayer side as well, as that character. But then in this movie, just that very Southern drawl kind of voice he does is like pitch fucking perfect. And I just love his character with like him and his bloodhound is like the best example of like that thing that a lot of people comment on about like dog owners who look like their dogs kind of deal. Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
With him and the fucking bloodhound. But just him going around just like doing the bit where he's talking about like, oh, he's got a great sense of smell. I mean, if there was a, God forbid, a murderer, the way he says, God forbid, the way he says it is so funny. But he would be able to sniff him out real good. You just, the dog, he wouldn't be able to say this, but telepathically, you connect and say like, I smell him over there. It's so fucking funny.
Yes. Yeah, and the Bloodhound is my favorite dog, I think, in the movie, maybe. The scene where he is like walking in the woods with the dog, which is also just really funny. And they have this like just adorable little scene. I love just the way he like just the way like the skin flaps around like on with the Bloodhound. I think is just like adorable, so cute. I love it. I'm normally not a big dog person. I prefer smaller dogs, but like it's such a good dog. I love that dog. Yeah. I don't know. Do you have a favorite dog though? By any chance?
To quote the great song that Levy and O'Hara sing, God loves a terrier. And I love their little terrier, which we should also mention that, like, in the credits, these dogs are credited in a really interesting way, where they have, like, the weird prefix where it's, like, some of them have can CH in front of their names, which is apparently related to, a lot of them are Canadian Kennel Club Championship winners, so that's what the can means.
Oh, huh.
And the CH is apparently indicating that they qualified for a championship of some sort. And then their names are listed as like for example, the Hubert the Bloodhound is played by CH Quiet Creek's Stand By Me. And apparently the dog's name is Stand By Me, and he had two trainers named Quiet and Creek. So that's how it's like put into the credits.
Oh,
it's so
interesting.
It's so very interesting. And then like the terrier is played by Can CH Yorix Brylo, Bryllo, is the name of that dog. But yeah, I just love that little dog, especially like whenever they're holding it. It's so cute. And then even when like during the dog show, the way they just, it's like, it's got, like you mentioned, like that ending of the movie has a very kind of like underdog sports story, pardon the pun, where like, especially for him, like you would never think that dog would win the show with all these like big, like the poodle that Jane Lynch has, or some of these other dogs that are much more elaborate. There's no way that terrier would win.
What's the poodle's name again? It's
Rhapsody in White.
Such a great name. Yeah, I love like for the terrier when like it's when they're doing one of like the direct to the camera interviews, and they're just kind of being like, who's gonna win, and the dog just like sticks its tongue out and like just it's so cute. Yeah, like I again, which is why I really love just like Levy and Catherine O'Hara. Like I just like like that underdog story, and like especially you were mentioning like the epilogue. Like I think the final shot of like the show where like they put the dog up in the air and it has like a side eye and like freeze frames on it, I think is like, we'll talk about the epilogue, but like that is like a perfect final frame of the movie, I think.
Especially, I love how the ending of that too is like him and O'Hara are like yelling at each other like it's Rocky and Adrian at the end of the first Rocky. It's so funny. But yeah, we mentioned the poodle, which by the way, the name of the poodle who played Rhapsody in White is Can CH XL's Desi Doos It with a Pizzazz. That's the full name that's listed for that dog.
Oh god.
But yeah, that's where you have like trained by Jane Lynch and also Jennifer Coolidge as well. And we kind of talked about their storyline. But I love so much like the introduction to Jennifer Coolidge with her husband, who she's totally physical with, as she says, played by Patrick Crenshaw, who's a great old man character actor. Maybe some people would know him as Blue from Old School, amongst other things. Just the perfect old man, too, just with his, like, with his, like, upper lip, like, so tucked in to his fucking jaw. But the way that she's, like, she's just speaking the entire time from just like, oh, some people would say we're not physical, but we're incredibly physical. I have to get him off me.
Yeah,
it's especially the best bit in that is where she's like, we have so much in common. We both love soup.
Talking and not talking.
We could not talk for hours.
I love, like, yeah, we could not talk for hours and still find things to not talk about. Such a funny line.
And man, Jennifer Coolidge is such a great example where, like, she's been, you know, acting for, like, so long. And obviously she had, like, bouts with fame. Like, a lot of people around this time knew her best as Stifler's mom, which is interesting given also Eugene Levy is in this movie. And this is also after American Pie. But I like that she's had this real resurgence with White Lotus, even as someone who's not watched that show at all. I know she's, like, the one recurring person who's, like, in every single season. And she just had a great interview, I think, for Variety, where she talked about just like, yeah, you know, I get a lot more, it's a lot better to date if you're the White Lotus lady. I have, like, young guys come up to me and saying that I'm so fucking hot. And she's like, they're like, oh, Coolidge, you know, and they even having that fucking weird MasterCard commercial that, like, is playing all the time and shit like that.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it's really interesting the way that, right, like, she and Parker Posey just have these kind of resurgences, and, like, she's really good in this movie, like, not given, like, a ton to do necessarily, like what she has here, she really, like, just, again, kind of like the same thing with John Michael Higgins, like the outfits, and, like, when she's eating that popcorn later, like, that's such, like, her, like, yeah, like, I'll go out when I get another message from myself.
Yeah, and her and Lynch have, like, a great chemistry. I agree with you. You can kind of sense there is kind of, like, a sexual chemistry that's there, even though at the same time they are, like, snapping at each other. Like, the whole bit where it's like they say, oh, she's doing my makeup this particular bit, and then later on she's interviewed and she just has, like, the spiky hair, but, like, no makeup on, clearly. And it's like, well, she tried to do some makeup, and it's like, yeah, I was doing, like, a Sophia Loren kind of thing for her. It was nightmarish and garish.
Persian eye.
Persian. Yeah, I really, and Lynch is also interesting because, like, a lot of people would know her from Glee, basically at this point, but she really gets her start around, like, this era in a lot of these Christopher Guest movies, and she fucking kills. She's so fucking funny in this movie.
Yeah. God, I mean, like, not to jump ahead to the epilogue, but, like, the part of the epilogue I do really like is her reveal of, like, the magazine that they're doing, where she's like, American bitch for the lesbian dog owner. It's so great. Yeah, like, she is, like, the person. Yeah, I know her from. I've never watched Glee, but it is mainly what I know her from, right? And, or, you know, and obviously from, like, her voice performances and, like, you know, Wreck-It Ralph and stuff like that. And yeah, she is just really, really funny in this.
I mean, and there's a couple of people we haven't really talked about. I mean, I just want to share, like, an interesting cameo I completely forgot about in this movie is one of Harlan Pepper's buddies is Will Sasso, later of Mad TV fame, who's very funny with the whole bit. It's just like, oh, so you're gonna go fishing up there? I'm like, well, I'm doing the dog show. I don't think I'll have enough time. Yeah, you're gonna go fishing. And then he talks to the dog and just like, who's gonna catch a big fish? Who's gonna catch a big fish?
Well, and, like, again, this is the thing I like about these kind of, like, small roles like this. Like, the movie isn't bending itself over backwards to feature these cameo roles. Like, Will Sasso shows up in that one bit, and he's gone, you know, and that's it. And I think a similar thing is with Bob Balaban, who I love seeing anytime. But again, the movie isn't bending itself over backwards to show you Bob Balaban. He just shows up when they need him, and, like, every time he shows up, it's funniest, but particularly when it's him and Fred Willard is just one of the funniest scenes in the entire movie with Columbus and the Mayflower.
Or the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. Yes, but that wasn't really what involved the Mayflower at all.
Just him being like, and they didn't land there, of course. And Bob Allen like, well, they did, and like that's not important.
But
so funny.
yeah, I also love the detail of like Balaban when he's introduced with like his dog, and he has a dog that's like as big as he is. It's just so fucking funny. Like Balaban is like, he could just be funny if he just sat there and did nothing. Like in the funniest moment in Mascots, there's a bit where they're watching like the mascot competition. And he became like my sort of audience representation, where he was just looking at his phone, bored, like in the audience. And I'm like, that's just fucking funny. It's Bob Balaban, especially with a cell phone. He's so funny to me. And you would like these movies. He's a guest regular, Bryan. So you will see a lot more of him in like Guffman and Almighty Wind as well. But yeah, just very no nonsense business. Also a similar vein, Ed Begley Jr., who plays the hotel manager. Just
Yeah.
begling it up in the best way. Just like, look, Ed Begley Jr., you mainly cast to be like a very nice white collar dad kind of thing. And he exudes that perfect. Like his whole tour where he's talking about like, oh yeah, we always prepare for the dog shows. We've been hosting this, for 8 years. And we make sure to have all the different varieties of ways to get rid of pee. Where it's like, if you want for the heavy duty stuff, you get the hydrogen peroxide. Or even when he's talking to Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara, great, we're just like, oh, so how was your trip up? And Eugene Levy just going on like, oh, it's great. We went up there and it was kind of, very sunny for a while. Then we hit Missouri and started getting overcast. And Begley's just politely nodding and just wanting to get this moment over with. That's what I love, especially when like they establish these characters in like the first 30 minutes or so. And then when they all get to the dog show, them interacting with each other is so funny. I just love like when you have these characters perfectly established and then you have them interact. It feels like these people have their own comedic games that they're going after. And they're like really bouncing off each other. Like when Higgins meets up with Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara, and they're like talking back and forth with each other and fucking I believe Levy says like some kind of joke and Higgins is like, oh, who are you? Where did you come from?
So great. But I think two things. I think one, this movie does a really great job at making these people feel like real. Like Eugene, whatever Eugene Levy's joke in that scene is not very funny, like in a natural sense, but it is like, again, the way that this movie is kind of treating these people with a bit of absurdity, I think is like, it's so perfectly tuned. And also I think a good thing this movie does is it doesn't have, and I think this goes into like this feeling like kind of a real documentary. Like I wonder if you showed this to someone who didn't really know who these stars were, if they would just think it was a real documentary, because there's not a lot of like, and this probably goes to the improvisational nature of making this thing, but like there's not a lot of like inherent tension between the members. There's not a lot of like, we get a little bit of like them interacting with each other, but the movie isn't like, oh, here are these 5 like groups of people, they're all going to clash together and there's going to be like fights and whatever. Like it feels very natural when they interact with each other and when they overlap with one another. Like I don't know, there's just not the movie doesn't feel the need to be like, okay, now we need to have all of them in a room together yelling at each other or something like that. Like it feels very natural in that kind of way. It again, like it feels like a real documentary, it's part of the thing with like a lot of mockumentaries made like after this is like they don't feel like real documentaries, right? Like kind of what you're talking about earlier of like shooting on digital, like it kind of cheapens it. It doesn't make it feel as weighty, as kind of like real as it would be. And yeah, it's one of the things that this movie like does really, really well, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting how like with The Office, they kind of like for a while bent themselves over backwards to keep a documentary style and kind of dwindled from that, versus Parks and Rec, which I think is the better show, had that in the first season that kind of sucked. And then they would still do like the kind of the asides, like kind of I forget, what was that when you like interview somebody like on their own in a documentary? Talking Head. They'll have like the Talking Head bits, but they really just were like, we're not going to give that much of a shit about making it naturalistic, and I think that makes Parks and Rec a better show, quite frankly.
what is this movie about? Like, if you ask me, and I'd be like, it's just chronicling a dog show. You know, like there's like tension with like when Catherine O'Hara like slips and falls, or like Parker Posey with the bumblebee, which is funny.
Oh my god!
But
so
like,
funny.
yeah, but like, there's not a lot of like dramatization, I guess I would say. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't feel like
There's no villain or hero technically.
Right, exactly.
Even if like Eugene Levy wins, but it's not a case of like, oh, he is like the real underdog who we're all rooting for necessarily. It's like they're all kind of like shitty underdogs to some extent.
Yeah.
Which I think is endearing, especially like makes like the stuff where they interact really great. Like I love the bit where Guest is like grooming his dog before he goes out, and Jane Lynch comes over, just like, oh, look at this fella. How old is he? Oh, he's 2 years old. He's a real slobber puss. Like, oh, yeah, it's real slobber. That's right. Like, you can tell these people have like a mutual love of dogs. Which, I mean, I'll say this: I have someone who's become especially a dog person in the last few years. I love dogs, but I do find dog people incredibly fascinating because of how like peculiar they can be about their dogs. Like, I love my dog, but at the same time, I'm not like ridiculous. Like, I don't know, maybe say some people in my family can be about their own dogs, be a bit more like overprotective of them to a certain extent. Like I love it's one of my favorite bits with Michael McKean and John Michael Higgins is where they're like on the phone with the guy who's sitting their other Shih Tzu, and they're just like, "Can you put him on? I just want to say goodnight to him."
Right.
Like, oh, I
yes.
can hear him breathing, and then sings the song.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what like the magic of this movie is that it again like treats this with sincerity, in like the Mayflower Dog Show as this like prestigious event, but also it does kind of poke fun at just how kind of weird dog people are and how like obsessive they are over like their dogs or whatever. And I like it, but again, there is a sincerity in like the Mayflower Dog Show. Like I really like a lot of like documentaries and stuff that are about events, right? Like one of the things I watched some of the like the Olympics like documentaries that were on a Criterion, and I just find it so inherently fascinating. Just like an event, just the goings on at an event, it just creates drama and creates just kind of like an atmosphere and stuff like that. And I just like, it's what I really like about this movie is that like you have all these ridiculous characters, but also like, I don't know, the dog show is like very interesting, and like the fact that they do all the different rounds and stuff like that. Again, we'll get to Fred Willard, who also like really helps those scenes, but I really like the fact that it kind of like actually engages with the event itself.
And also even how like certain people who raise dogs end up like creating certain like problems. Like Hitchcock and Posey are a great example of that, where they're like at each other's throats and they're constantly arguing about just like, we have to make sure the dog's great, we have to make sure he's fine. And you notice that their dog is the only one that's like outwardly like not social with humans. And I think that's like a really smart way to portray like the fact that you have like, oh, people who are like really combative with each other end up raising a dog who is like kind of confrontational. And I think really works with the fact that like he's the one who ends up like getting on top of like the one judge, and he's like, no, you're disqualified, I'm sorry, you can't go forward. And I think it's actually like a pretty smart like story beat that shows that, like, even with like the limited amount of like an outline that we have, like I'm sure I believe that would have been in the outline, just like, oh, these two are at each other's throats and their dog gets disqualified. But fleshing that out with these two people like being so obsessed about like, oh, where's Mr. Bumblebee? You gotta go back to the hotel and get Mr. Bumblebee. And then she's like fucking tearing the hotel room apart with like Ed Begley Jr. and the maid, and just like screaming, just like, you're hotel people, why can't you help me find this? Or like when he's just, did you look under the bed? That's the first place you look when you lose something.
Yeah,
so
funny. Her when she goes to like the dog, the toy store, which is a great line where he's like, well, there's a toy store like downstairs. She's like, why didn't you tell me that before? And like when she goes there and like has again another great Parker Posey delivery where like the guy is just kind of like showing her random toys, like, you know, this is kind of like shaped like a bee, whatever. And then she shows him the bear, or he shows her the bear, and she's like, that is a bear in a bee costume. It's just that one. I don't know why, but that just cracked me up the way that Parker Posey delivers that. It's so good.
Shout out also to Hiro Kanagawa, who's the guy who plays the shop owner. I think is very funny. Where like he just sees her like storming with like her adult braces and exasperated, talking about like a bee toy, and it's like okay. Looks over at the bear in the bee costume, picks up, just like, is this what you're looking for? It's so funny. But speaking of funny, okay, we've been dancing around him. Fucking Fred Willard is so goddamn funny in this movie. I mean,
yeah.
He's like primarily, I think, known for these movies, even though he was like very like these movies helped kind of like populate like his like comedy career. He's in Spinal Tap as well. He's been like a couple of these, and he was like a very solid like comedic actor in like the 80s and 90s. But he always is like a huge standout of these fucking Christopher Guest movies, and he is stellar in this movie alongside Jim Piddock, who is another Christopher Guest regular. And I love the fact that like the big motivation that Guest put out to him was like, okay, Jim, study as much as you can about dogs, and Fred, don't study anything. Don't have no knowledge in your head when you're announcing this dog show. And it's so funny, just the ridiculous non sequiturs he's pitching to Jim Piddock, and Piddock keeping that stiff British upper lip the whole time is so it's comedy dynamite. It's one of the best like comedy duos in a fucking movie. I just every time I watch, and I've watched this movie a couple times, just all their jokes feel like new to me. It's just so fucking great. Just a bit like the they have obedience training. It's like, I went to one of those obedience places and I had to leave after put candle wax on my crotch.
And like Fred Willard has got just like the perfect sort of like commentator's like voice and face for it, and this specific type of like commentator who's always trying to like make a joke and do something. Like again, him with Balaban is just amazing, like just fucking like heat. He feels like a genuine commentator who is trying to make like just constantly trying to make jokes, but like they're also just really uncomfortable jokes. It's absolutely perfect.
Especially when like Piddock is so tired of it, and Fred Willard just says like, we like to have a few laughs.
Yeah, Piddock has like just one like kind of like throwaway line where he's just like, yeah, you told that one last year. Which again, like there's a story in there where it's just like Piddock's character has to fucking deal with Fred Willard like every single year. Like,
I believe that's a response to like the whole proctologist thing that he does, the proctologist joke. Or I love the bit too when the Hitchcock ends up getting the dog, their dog gets disqualified. Hitchcock and Parker Posey's dog get disqualified, and Fred Willard's comment about just like, he's still a champion, even if he's sent off in disgrace.
Oh god, yeah. And then like, I mean, another one of his lines that like really got me is when he just starts being like, how much do you think I can bench press? Like when he's like 350 pounds. And it's just like, what the fuck? Oh god.
Oh, and I've loved Willard, especially like even in some of he and Coolidge like were in some dire straits after this movie. Like they were both in I believe Epic movie, a movie I saw in theaters because I was a child and very ignorant of what comedy could be. Even then, like always trying to like make something work, always trying to make something good, and even like he's passed away since, and he also had the weird controversy of like I think it was like in 2018 he was caught masturbating in a porn theater, like kind of like the Paul Rubens thing, which I think at that point was just like a weird thing of like I didn't know porn theaters still existed that late into this, and also that just feels like an old man thing. Like he doesn't know how to work his computer. Sure,
yeah,
what?
I mean,
But that feels like almost a Christopher Guest fucking bit that he would do that.
God, yeah, I'm trying to think of it. Like one of his other ones. Oh god, the one where he just starts talking about like the book of just women bathing their dogs, and just like really goes on that for a bit. It's just he really like sells each of those bits though. Like it is just. It is like perfectly tuned. Like I said, like it's kind of like a John Michael Higgins in like Pitch Perfect kind of role, right? Like that's kind of the Like I love a kind of like commentator like that. Like it's one of my favorite kinds of things in a comedy is just a commentator who, and like Fred Willard is like the minute he shows up, I'm just like, this is perfect casting. Like you could not get anyone better for this. It's amazing.
Yeah, especially like dumb bits like he went after her like she was made of ham. Or especially like the really commenting on the like Piddock relationship too. There's a point where like I think when the terrier comes out or whatever, and it's just like, oh, I think this dog might actually like win it or something. And for the first time, Jim Piddock's like, I never thought I would say this, but you're right. I think you're right.
And they don't like hold on that. Like they like, again, it's kind of like the like you told this one last year, like where they kind of just like throw it away, but like you hear it and you're like, wait, what's that? Like what? It's just easily just like the MVP of this movie. And I think it's part of like, again, like having Piddock there, who is again, more of like the stiff kind of British, like actually being like, oh yeah, a gorgeous dog, like, oh that one, yes, yeah. And Fred Willard just completely being ridiculous. And I think it's like,
how did they get those schnauzers to be miniature? It's a braiding process. They braid them like that.
Breeding.
And I think that naturalism, like what you're talking about, like sells it. Because like if they were more silly characters, both of them, I don't think that would work nearly as well. It feels like it would be more like Jason Bateman's character in Dodgeball. That interesting strategy caught and see how it works. Like that's kind of funny, but it's so much funnier when it's just like two people who feel very natural. Like even Willard, as much as he is being like kind of over the top, he feels exactly like that relative that you go to family reunions.
Yes,
at,
that's a better.
And
yeah,
they think they're very funny.
Mm-hmm.
They think they're very funny, and every time just like you politely laugh at their jokes. But you're like, let's see what Aunt Mary's doing. Mary, how are you? You just want to get away.
The bits where he is like, he will tell a joke, it doesn't land for Piddock, and then he like hits him on the arm, just like, I'm just messing with you. Is like, yes, exactly what you're talking about. And yet again, like I think it's a perfect microcosm for what this movie is doing, where like Willard is so ridiculous, and yet like when they are doing all of the showings for the different kinds of dogs, like genuinely invested in it. Like I'm genuinely kind of curious, like on the edge of my seat, like, oh, who's the judge gonna call? Which we'll also get to one of the judges later on, which is an amazing cameo that made me so happy.
Well, I mean, I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
What is Donis Davis?
Yes, Major Briggs.
Major Briggs himself, yes.
Yes, yeah. Man, I was really happy to see him, and also kind of especially because of the fact that he was on Twin Peaks and like that role that he plays on Twin Peaks, like kind of a perfect like judge for a dog show. Like I love it's a very small role, but like I was just so happy to see him in this movie.
Yeah, perfect casting. Another guy who's kind of like that is a guy named Don Lake, who plays Graham Chisholm, who's the guy who's like talking about like, oh yeah, we have this event every year. Like that guy with like the perfect like kind of balding hair, and talking about like, oh yeah, we're setting everything up, and we'll see how how it works. Like Guest just knows like he is such a great. I think what works about him best as a director, beyond like, because this movie isn't like flashy in terms of its look. It's very clearly just like handheld camera, kind of like moving from place to place with like a very mounted camera that's just kind of like interviewing the two couples, like zooming in, zooming out, whatever. But his greatest strength as a director is really just like knowing who these comedic talents are and placing them in like perfect roles for them. I think that's just it's incredible. Like his greatest asset as a director is his casting ability.
That is part of it, I think, because again, with Willard, or with I think like casting Eugene Levy as like that kind of guy, I think is like it's just genius. And like again, with the kind of improvisational way that this movie was made, like if you cast that person in the perfect role, like they're just gonna give you comedy gold. I think that's a lot of it. Obviously, like the fact that you have such talented people in here, like the rest of this cast, I just think like the casting like really matters. As we talked about earlier this season with Bewitched, like casting really matters, you know, because that's
Yep.
an example of casting going like really, really poorly. And this movie has like the opposite. It has like perfect casting for every single one of these like people. It's amazing.
And even Guest knowing how to cast himself in this particular role. Like, I love, just another thing, I have the movie on the background. I love the way he runs with the dog when they're, like, showing him around. Like, his run is so funny. It's like he's got 2 lead feet, but he's still at the same time light. It just, like, it works so perfectly. The contrast with, like, Higgins and even Eugene Levy, like, having him have, like, the 2 left feet, which I believe is where the, like, I think you're right, comes from Vidic, yes. I think, actually. But the way that, like, he is so nervous, but at the same time, he's just like, I gotta keep myself together, and I'm walking with my 2 left shoes. Just the commitment on Levy in this character, I think, really works with, like, the teeth, and even just like bits with, like, I was a real Casanova back in the day, and, like, that fucking yearbook photo looking of him, that prom outfit,
where he looks
with
like
the
Austin
eyes
Powers.
crossed. And even, like, I love the bit too when, like, after Catherine O'Hara falls over and she's like, well, you could walk him out, you could do it, and he's just like, you have a concussion, it feels, once again, just like Levy's, like, so in the role, and I think that's what really endears people to him, like, as, like, Jim's dad in the American Pie movies, and how that man made so much fucking money being in so many direct-to-video sequels of those fucking movies, which is so funny to me. But yeah, I think that's what even endears him with, like, I haven't watched much of that Schitt's Creek show. I think that's why people were, like, inherently drawn to, like, him and Catherine O'Hara in that show, because it's just, like, they also come from sketch comedy, and I think have a similar kind of, like, devotion to character, which when especially you run this for, like, the 90 minutes that this is at, you feel at least, like, kind of endeared to them, even if the movie is kind of, like, poking fun at them, having, like, cruel things happen to them. At the same time, like, because of the actor's commitment, it just makes you so much in their corner. Anybody in this cast really in their corner, maybe except, like you mentioned, for Posey and Hitchcock, who deserve to be disqualified. But the epilogue admits that, like, they have a better sex life because they got rid of their dog. Which the implication, like, what happened to their dog? Where did they drop off their fucking dog before they got their pug?
They do have early on they have a really funny line, because, like, early on they're talking about how they're the ones who are talking about, like, meeting at Starbucks, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and they have the, like, Hitchcock has the line where he's like, yeah, now I'm a chai latte with soy kind of guy, because of the lactose. And Parker Posey just goes like, oh yeah, you're lactose intolerant now. it's just again, like, just the way that Parker Posey is delivering these lines that, like, on the surface are not, like, that funny, but she just, like, lands them, like, so well. And I don't know, that one just, like, really got to me for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that these people coming up with these jokes, it also builds a bit of character interestingly, like the bit where Higgins and McKean are packing, and Higgins keeps packing kimonos. He's like, you've packed 6 kimonos, that's going to be the 7th one, and we're going to be in Philly for 48 hours. And Higgins like, you're right, I need another one.
And when they get to the hotel room and they're, like, nailing, like, that, like, carpet thing to the wall, and, like, and, like, hanging up stuff. It's like, what? Oh god! But again, it's kind of played for laughs, kind of played for ridiculousness. But, like, I don't know. We all know people who overpack way too much when they go somewhere for, like, 2 days. Like, it's the kind of the way that this movie's skirting that line of ridiculousness, but also still humanity in that way.
Well, let's talk about, I mean, is there any other person in this cast we haven't really talked about, Brian, you want to shout out? Because there's been, like, there's a couple of, like, smaller parts that we haven't really mentioned.
Let me see. Well, I guess we haven't talked too much about the scene where, we mentioned it, but where Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara go to visit, like, the friends. I don't know who that couple is. I don't know if they are someone or if they're, like, smaller roles. But
the lady Faye is played by Linda Cash, who's in a bunch of these Christopher Guest movies as well. But also Larry Miller plays Max, and Larry Miller is, like, a guy who's been in, like, everything. I remember as a kid he was the evil principal in Max Keeble's Big Move. I don't know if you know what this movie is.
Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. It was a movie from a very specific like 2001 era. Josh Peck is in it.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
Yes.
Man.
He's very funny. Is like he keeps doing like the cease thing to like all the kids. Great like evil villain principal. He's also in like 10 Things I Hate About You. He's just like a great consummate like comedy character actor in particular. And I mean, yeah, he's very fun here. We're just talking about being like a hostage negotiator. Just like I face that every single day of my life. You just face like, oh, somebody got the wrong pants. I have to face with like life or death situations. And the way that later on, like their kid kidnaps the dog and like puts him on the top of the roof because like the parachuter thing,
Yes.
which is very funny. But just the line I think he has where it's just like, I'm gonna put my left thumb through your eye, you little freak.
Right, but like right before that, he's like, don't worry, I do this all the time, I know how to handle this. And then yeah, he goes into that line. It's really funny. That, and like the fact when he like meets Catherine O'Hara and he just like makes out with her like, right in front of everyone, I think is like just so funny. Yeah, I that is a really kind of just great scene that again like is giving you a bit of story about these people, but is all like it's kind of a thing that's like it feels like just a sketch, you know, like just part of a sketch, but in a good way, right? Because like if you put that scene into, you know, a fucking like Apatow movie, which is like over 2 hours long, like it feels unnecessary, but because it's in this like tight 90-minute movie, like it's fun. It's a really fun scene.
Yeah, I mean, there's also, I just, even like some of the extras here, like one of my favorite bits, I didn't notice it until this time, but there's the bit where, at the very beginning, where Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara are having like the party where they sing their like God Loves a Terrier song, and you can see a lady behind them trying so hard not to break, trying so hard not to laugh hysterically at this, and it's just like, she like moves away from the camera, and they finish the song, and she like goes back and like starts clapping. Like, I do not envy the task of like being an extra in one of these movies where it's like you have to be a completely natural person as like these people are being ridiculous. Like the bits where like Posey and Hitchcock are like yelling at each other like in a little kind of like pen before they like get out to like the dog show.
Yeah.
It's like, go get busy, B. Like if I was in that scene, I would be like fucking dying. I would be like on the fucking floor. Like I couldn't keep it straight. I would be fired.
Yeah, I like the people also at the like when they're, I think it's right after they do the God Loves a Terrier song, like the people that they're talking to, where they're like, yeah, we're going to Philadelphia, we're going to see the Bell, we're going to see where they make the cream cheese. And I like that lady that's like, oh, I want to see where they make the light cream cheese. Just...
Well, no, especially that like the guy comes like gets his wife over, like, Margaret, come here. He's gonna go to Philadelphia where they see where they're gonna make where the cream cheese is made. We've been talking about that all the time. We want to do that. Perfect, and just like parody of like suburban, just complete lack of like flat enthusiasm over just bullshit.
Yes.
Like even when they're also the people who are like helping them pack up and like going up. Shout out there in I believe like Pensacola, Florida. They talk about how they like met at like a Pensacola High or some shit like that. But you know, let's talk about the epilogue thing, because we can kind of dance around that as well. But like, so after the big kind of like the show goes over well, we have a couple different scenes. We have Catherine O'Hara and Eugene Levy have taken their fame to the point of they're recording, which I do love. It's like the Captain and a Terrier, or the Terrier and Camille, or whatever, which is like such a the Captain and Cookie. That's what it is. The Captain and Cookie, just like a perfect parody of like Captain and Tennille. Have like silly bands, and the one guy behind the booth is another ex of Catherine O'Hara's. Then we have, I believe, what you're mentioning with like Jane Lynch and Jennifer Coolidge having the lesbian magazine, where it's like they establish that they've been together, but it seems like a bit contentious. And then fucking Christopher Guest has done his whole thing. We haven't mentioned this. Like he has the side gag of loving ventriloquism and trying to study for that.
One of the biggest laughs that I got was at the end in this epilogue where he's talking about like ventriloquism and like that's what his thing is now, I guess. And he says like, well, ventriloquism, it's an ancient art form, and it cuts to like hieroglyphics of just like a hieroglyphic of just like a guy holding a tiny guy. It's
Yes.
just so funny for some reason.
And even
to me.
the scene also earlier where he's practicing doing the ventriloquism and studying how to like throw his voice. So fucking funny, especially when like the dog comes over. And once again, guess, like I mentioned with like the whole boom mic thing from the SNL days, the dog comes over, it's just like, oh, is that a bloodhound? Oh, it's a bloodhound. What are you doing, doggy? What are you doing over here?
He, for some reason, he the voice that he's doing reminds me so much of Boomhauer from King of the Hill.
He does feel like a King of the Hill character. Yes, 100%.
It is like
Yes.
it's amazing. I love the accent he's doing. It's so good.
But and also his little show that he's doing with like he does the ventriloquism act and he's kind of okay at it, but then he does like a whole lasso show thing and the cactus that keeps falling over and he has to like pick it back up. And then like especially the face that he makes when he's like doing the lasso thing, it's clear like it's falling apart. It's not he's doing a terrible job at it, but he's so committed and he just does this like weird fucking face, just like perfect. Perfect fucking
Yeah.
and then I think it's just the Posey Hitchcock thing, right?
Yes, which it ends on that and like the
No, I'm sorry. Higgins and McKean are also established as like probably the best ending anybody has.
That's
where
really funny,
right? Where they have like we didn't decide not to do the dog show and that's fine, so we decided to commit to doing a calendar of different movie scenes we create with our two shit scenes.
They're like, yeah, we love the old like 30s MGM like musicals and stuff.
We're gonna do like Gone with the Wind, Casablanca, and then like the Kalman wife, which is the funniest one.
Oh man, yeah, it's it's a weird thing because I think this epilogue, like, you kind of don't need it. Like I said before, like the movie's final frame could be just Eugene Levy holding up the dog. The dog has a really funny look on its face, and like that freeze frame just ends the movie. Like I think it is great, but I kind of like some of these bits, and like even though like the Jane Lynch Jennifer Coolidge one like is fine. It has the American bitch joke, which is just that's just a funny bit. Like the Eugene Levy Catherine O'Hara thing is like the part that does make me laugh is when Catherine O'Hara says something to him like, "Oh, you've grown" or something. He's like, "I'm growing right now as we speak" or something. Just really funny to me. Yeah, I don't know. It is a weird thing. You could cut it out of the movie, and I think the movie still works like 100%. And like you have a nice tight like closed narrative. But I don't know. It is kind of nice in a way, I think.
Yeah, I think the thing is, I kind of mentioned this earlier in the YouTube essay I mentioned, like, goes into this, I think, very well. But I think Guest does definitely have a problem, I think, with, like, having his characters have kind of happy endings because he's so committed to kind of, like, the mockumentary concept. So, like, with, like, Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara, like you mentioned, if we ended on, like, that high of, like, Eugene Levy picking up the dog, like, it's ridiculous, but you still leave on, like, an emotionally satisfied note. And I don't feel like because he, like, has the whole thing of, like, oh, well, we have to do, like, the documentary thing, we have to, like, follow up, like, would a character really be changed by this point? He has to go back to, like, oh, they've squandered whatever, like, they gained from their winning and are now just doing, like, this incredibly foolhardy, ridiculous, like, kitsch album that sucks and shit like that. There is a bit of that, like, oh, we can't have, like, a character, like, really progress forward. Even, like, Jane Lynch and Jennifer Coolidge, like, they had, like, their kiss. So it's like, oh, have they, like, really, like, found love with each other? It's like, not really. Like, Jennifer Coolidge does not seem like she's that invested in this relationship at all. And there's, like, kind of a weird, like, oh, she's, like, living in sort of a weird hell. Really, like, and even, like, Christopher Guest's own character has that, too, where it's just like, oh, he was this character who had, like, a bit of, like, a respect and dignity for himself, and that's, like, completely shattered by, like, his new pursuit. But at the same time, there is an attempt at, like, well, this is what they want to spend their time with. So it's kind of endearing at the same time, but there's that weird tug and pull that I think it's a lot worse, I think, in the Waiting for Guffman and, like I mentioned, Mighty Wind have, like, just incredibly depressing, just, like, not funny endings for their characters, I think. Like, particularly, Parker Posey has, like, the saddest fucking ending in Waiting for Guffman. It's kind of just a bummer. It's not even, like, funny. Yeah. It's really fucking sad.
Yeah, I feel like, if we're talking about this movie as, existing between going in between, like, emotional, like, actual human sincerity and absurdist comedy. I think the epilogue seems to want to end on the absurdist comedy as opposed to the humanity of like the sort of triumph at the end of the at the end of the dog show, which yeah, I feel like you could read that this ending as being kind of sad in a weird, like, for a lot of these characters, and you could kind of read it as being just funny, which I guess is more where I land, of just like, it's kind of funny. That's it. Like, I'm not trying, like, I don't think the movie wants to leave off on a lot of the humanity, which, like, it is kind of a downside of the movie, because again, the rest of the movie, like, has a genuine kind of like care for these people, even though they are just like clowns. A lot of, they're ridiculous, but yeah, it is certainly like a weird note to end on. The more that I like kind of sit with it, the more that I think about it.
One other thing before we get to final thoughts, I want to like shout out in terms of I guess kind of like the grounded realism of the mockumentary element of it. They originally wanted to shoot it just like an actual dog show. They figured they'd be able to do that, and they were rejected by every single dog show possible. So they had to create their own dog show, which they described as like kind of like a living hell to do. And I didn't know that until fairly recently, and that's astounding, because you watch the dog show and it looks just like this is a real fucking like dog show. The way that, the convention center is laid out, the way that like even like the big kind of stadium area. What's very interesting, because a big thing about this movie is like this was popular enough, especially in kind of like a cult way, where like it made, it cost 10 million, made 20 million in theaters, but this was the Christopher Guest movies are a prime example of like the DVD era of passing them around.
Oh, sure.
Kind of thing. And just people like really gaining an appreciation to the degree that by 2002, the reason that the National Dog Show airs after every Thanksgiving since 2002 is because of this movie. Like, this movie was popular enough by that point to make that like a major television event.
Yeah, because I was wondering during this, like, is the Mayflower Dog Show, like, is that a real thing? Which I'm finding out now it's not. Because I was trying to figure out because like, yeah, there is like a big dog show that I've seen like people post clips of, because the dogs they're very good dogs, and so I was trying to figure out like, yeah, it seems like a real dog show. Like, again, like the way that this movie is portraying this event is not like, I can't even think of a good example of like a movie that doesn't do this well. Maybe like the Pitch Perfect movies, I guess, like they're kind of like, but like this just, again, it feels very naturalistic, and I think it's what makes this feel real. That like, yeah, I was watching this and I was like, yeah, this I'm sure this is a real dog show, where they kind of like did some fudging around, maybe they used the convention center for like an hour or whatever to film, like just something like that. But yeah, no, that's really, really impressive, and like also just super impressive from like a dog handler's perspective, like just kind of like working with that many animals. Like, God, I can't imagine. But a lot of amazing dogs in this movie.
And apparently, like I said, all of these were like very well trained actual like show dogs, and I think it does really show perhaps that they are the best in that show. But yeah, let's go ahead and do final thoughts, Brian. Final thoughts on Best in Show.
Yeah, I did want to share. There's one more joke that Fred Willard has in this, which is really
just one
good.
more joke.
I just want one more joke. It's bothering me. It was where I think it's Piddock does the like, and I have a fun fact here. He wanted to be this judge wanted to be a priest, and Fred Willard just like, oh, I want to be a priest. Like, we won't. I wonder what went wrong there, but that's a different show. It's just so good. I love the way he delivers that. I really loved this movie. I think it's, as a like documentary, it's very good. Like, it's really well made, right? Like, yeah, like from a filmmaking perspective, like, again, it's not, like you said, it's not flashy. It's not like doing a bunch of crazy stuff like something like Popstar, for instance, which is very flashy, very big, and has like celebrity cameos every like 5 minutes or whatever. But it's really again, engaging with the idea of a comedy about just a dog show in just the most sort of straightforward way, which I like appreciate so much. Again, that this movie just doesn't feel the need to, like I said earlier, like faff about and have like extra bits, extra this. Like it's interesting that you said that they filmed like 60 hours because like this thing feels so tight and feels so like focused about what it's trying to do, and it doesn't feel overly engineered, obviously because it's very improvisational. Like Parker Posey and Michael Hitchcock's, like, we kind of lose track of them after they get like disqualified from the show, which is like, from a narrative perspective, you're kind of like, wait, but I want more Parker Posey and Michael Hitchcock. But from like no, this is a documentary about this dog show kind of perspective, it really works, like it works as a documentary just about this event, and every cast member is great. Every single person in this movie is fantastic. From like just all the main cast, but obviously like Fred Willard and like Bob Balaban is just like, I really cannot emphasize how funny that scene is between Balaban and Fred Willard. I know I said it earlier, but like just thinking about it is making me like just laugh. And like, again, I think it is a movie that like came out 25 years ago, which is very interesting, but it kind of feels like very modern in that way. Obviously, because all of these shows, we didn't even mention, like, isn't Modern Family like a mockumentary? Right?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
that might be the
like
laziest example of that.
Right, but like just how big this style has become and became right after this, like it's incredibly impressive, I think. And like there's mockumentaries that I love, one of which I will be talking about in a little bit here, that are great and do this sort of like engaging with the world of dog show kind of thing really well. But like it really feels like not a lot has been as good as this. Even stuff like The Office and Parks and Rec, which I like just kind of they pale in comparison to something like this because it's so funny. It's short, it's breezy, gets in, gets out. Like it's absolutely fantastic. I don't know how like big this movie is nowadays among like film fans like us. I don't know if like people around my age and younger are watching this movie, but I really hope they do, just because, I mean, obviously because of this cast and how big they, like, again, the resurgence they've all had and stuff, but it's just so funny. And, if anything, you get to see some really amazing and cute dogs in this movie. So yeah, I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah, it's really interesting with like the mockumentary angle of this as well, because it's something, like I mentioned, Guest really kind of almost perfected with like this movie, Waiting for Guffin and a Mighty Wind, like did so incredibly well, and then it's something he couldn't even like go back to really, because he doesn't even make like that many, like we did For Your Consideration, and that didn't really like hit at all, and then he didn't do another one of those for like 10 years until Mascots, and that really fucking just disappeared to any degree. And, he'll occasionally appear in, like, things, but now he's just, too busy being married to Jamie Lee Curtis. Which,
really?
There's that, and then also the weird fact that he's technically, like, a lord through, like, family relation, because, like, his family's British, and there was a point where, like, he's kind of technically Lord Guest. Even though there was a whole thing where, like, I think, like, in the late 90s, early 2000s, Tony Blair was like, no, we're not going to have the heritage-style things where, like, he doesn't get to seat in Parliament anymore, but he did. Like, it's so fucking weird. This guy's weird. It's so gobsmacking his whole life. But, yeah, it's, at the same time, like, his, like, 3 movies in particular, I think, like you mentioned, really influenced, like, so much of, like, modern comedy. Mm-hmm. And he has, like, such a singular, interesting footprint that, I guess he's going to try and bring back with, like, Spinal Tap, which I'll say, even as much as, like, I'm worried about that movie, I've been watching, like, a couple things where, like, after the 84 movie, they've returned to those characters, and the 3 of them are still very funny as those characters. Like, there's a whole bit there's, like, some like big compilation musical like album they put out, and they had like a bonus like interview with the band, quote unquote, where they're just like rattling off like stuff about the songs, and it's not like nearly as funny as Spinal Tap, but there's shit like they mention oh, you know, it's a real conundrum. You know, it's like, oh yeah, you know, conundrums, they give those out in schools now. It's important to wear those conundrums. Shit like that. Like he and McKean and Shearer are still incredibly funny people, and I think that's a real testament. Like with this movie, I think it shows like not just with like him, but also just everyone in this cast is so funny. I'm so glad so many of them have had like these minor resurgences, like you're mentioning. But even like just in these movies, like it feels like in this particular movie, the reason I think it's my favorite is because I think it has the best balance of like that emotional weight and the absurd satire that's going on at the same time that makes these characters feel incredibly engaging, incredibly endearing, in the way that, you know, you can kind of be endeared to a dog who will like bark at you, but then also lick your hand at certain points, like whatever. Like a dog can be kind of irritable. These humans are in their own way kind of like weird, bizarre animals, especially when you like get them all together in like a kennel. They kind of like react off each other in different ways. That's what I really like about particularly this one. I think it's my favorite of the Christopher Guest documentaries. I do agree that I think of the various movies we've talked about, like I think we had this question back when we were doing like Blues Brothers, where we talked about like, oh, can Gen Z get into fucking Blues Brothers? I think that's not nearly as likely. It's like this one feels like the one that most like a modern audience, especially like raised on, you know, this stuff, to the degree that I will just say I found this out fairly recently, that there's apparently like a couple Halloweens ago, Ariana Grande and I don't know the other actress's name. She was also on Victorious. I'm not familiar.
Oh, I can't remember her name, but yeah,
right.
yeah.
I think she played like the punk girl on Victorious, apparently. Mm-hmm. That was way after my time on Nickelodeon sitcoms. But the two of them did a whole thing where like they dressed up as like characters for Halloween from this movie and actually shot little recreation bits. So you see like Ariana Grande do like Eugene Levy cosplay.
Oh, that's great.
And it's
that's really
incredibly
good.
funny. And Jennifer Coolidge like Sheridan was just like, this is fucking funny. They really nailed it. It's so good. Yeah, and it's like they did that, and they also did the Jennifer Coolidge and Jane Lynch characters, and even like one of them, the other one who's not Ariana Grande, did like the Larry Miller character, while she's also on the opposite side doing Catherine O'Hara, and like hitting on herself. It's so fucking weird.
Oh, that's good.
But it does kind of show that, you know, like even 25 years later, like you're mentioning, this movie still has kind of like a staying power, and I think could like like I mentioned, I would recommend any like the youths out there, I think would like the Christopher Guest documentaries, those three, with some hesitation. Like a couple things don't hold up necessarily about them, but I think this one in particular just holds up incredibly well. Great movie, and a wonderful way to end our SNL season. Brian, how do you feel at the end of our SNL season?
Yeah, very good. A lot of very different kinds of movies, especially ending with this mockumentary. Yeah, just, I mean, well, I shouldn't say all great movies. We did watch Bewitched this
That's
season,
true.
But you know, yeah, very, very, very good, and I think just really cool to explore these various different facets of what SNL has. I don't want to say produced necessarily, because obviously, right, with this one, like, these people were already doing stuff before SNL, but like the fact that all of this stuff that we've been doing like revolves around the institution that is SNL. I think, like, we talked about it earlier, but like just shows how big of an impact SNL, you know, was like as an institution. And I think, like, again, we criticize it a lot for good reason, and like there's a lot of problems with it, but there's been a lot of great stars and a lot of great movies that have come from SNL or have revolved around SNL, which is like just a very, very, very cool thing.
Yeah, it's been especially interesting as like I've been watching like movies and stuff related to the actual episodes. I've been watching some of these like Peacock documentaries that have been coming out in the wake of like the 50th anniversary of SNL, and it's been fascinating how like there's such an interesting kind of like look at just 50 years of history of television that goes on with that, and also certain bits of revisionist history. Like I'll say, I watched, there was the one that's about like the 50 years of music for SNL that Questlove co-directed.
Okay.
That's on Peacock and has a lot of interesting stuff about like various different musicians. Like there's a great section about Fear, and Lee Ving is interviewed talking about like, you know, they infamously appear on SNL and they had like a whole musical appearance where people were like moshing in like that right in front of the stage and like getting onto the stage by the end of it, and that was like a big thing. Like Belushi wanted them on and all this other stuff. There's stuff like that that's incredibly fascinating. And then that documentary also has a whole thing about the Sinead O'Connor sort of appearance that was on SNL. I don't know. Do you know what this is?
Yes, she tore up the picture of the Pope on
Right.
SNL, right?
Yes, right. She did,
Yeah.
and was lambasted by many people in the media, particularly, even on SNL. Like I believe the next episode after that, Joe Piscopo, a great guy who has no horrible opinions, came on and was literally talking about like, oh man, if she ever comes back here, we should like beat her up, and the audience like cheers about it,
Oof.
shit like that. But noticeably in that documentary, Lorne Michaels is interviewed and just says like, I really admired her bravery out there. Like, fuck off, Lorne. No, you didn't. Fuck you. You were just angry that she did that on camera.
Yeah, I will say though, after doing all this, I am kind of interested in watching some of those. I think for that reason you're talking about, of just kind of like, this is 50 years of like pop culture history, right? Like, I mean, even in that playlist that you like put in there, like, just so many celebrities show up, and you're just like, oh right, like most celebrities, like big A-list celebrities, have done SNL at some point, whether it's hosting or obviously like performing on there. Like it's crazy. I'm interested to check some of those out, even yeah, with their kind of revisionist look from Lorne Michaels.
With the caveat that they're Peacock produced
Right, exactly.
documentaries that aren't necessarily critical. I'll just also say before we even get to Between the Lines, a recommendation, kind of tangentially related to this, is The People's Joker, one of my favorite movies from last year. Is very damning and critical about SNL as a process, and Lorne Michaels is literally a character.
Oh, really? Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it's incredibly fascinating, especially from someone like Vera Drew, who's been in the comedy world for so long, having a very damning portrayal, to the degree that Lorne Michaels, when they originally apparently put that movie out like in festivals and stuff, was voiced by Sarah Sherman before she had gotten hired.
Oh yeah.
And then she asked Vera, like, hey, can you have someone else record that? Because, I'm employed by him
A little
now.
awkward. My that's my boss.
And now Lorne Michaels is voiced by Maria Bamford, of all people, which is interesting.
Okay.
A very funny comedian who also has not been on SNL, but has a very interesting style. But we move on to our actual recommendation segment, Between the Lines. So for every episode, Bryan and myself recommend another film that, is kind of related to the movie we're talking about in some way. Like, could be another version of this criteria for the episode, like The Letter, like an atypical SNL movie, or, tangentially has like some kind of relation, like maybe a similar genre, or has a similar cast member, that kind of thing. So, Bryan, you're going first. What's your recommendation for Between the Lines for this episode?
Yeah. So my choice, it's a bit atypical. As I am not choosing. Now, Thomas, can you give me a Tim Allen style sound effect here on cue? Not a feature length film.
Oh, what?
It is a short movie, and a TV movie. I guess technically it was on HBO. I've mentioned Andy Samberg many times here, but I'm going to recommend 7 Days in Hell, which is, yes, a kind of TV short, I guess, that was put on HBO as part of like their HBO sports thing. Yes, with Andy Samberg, who has done the mockumentary thing, as I mentioned, with like Popstar, but this short movie, whatever you want to call it, is about 43 minutes, and it stars Andy Samberg as a tennis player. This is kind of a mockumentary within the world of tennis, as Aaron Williams, who, in just an incredibly funny thing, is the adopted son of Richard Williams, the father of Serena and Venus Williams. Serena Williams.
I was very upset that King Richard cut him out, by the way. I think real revisionist history.
This documentary features a few actual tennis players, like Serena Williams, John McEnroe, Chris Evert. And as Serena Williams explains, it was a reverse blindside where they adopted a white kid to play tennis. And this is it does fit into what we're talking about, though. It's a mockumentary about him and his rivalry with Kit Harington as Charles Poole, and the 7-day long tennis match that they played. In the background, I have become a huge tennis fan over the past year. I love it. I love watching it. I think it's just an amazing sport. And this mockumentary does the same exact thing that like Best in Show does, where it is fully engaging with the world of tennis and their match set at Wimbledon, which is just amazing. But just in a completely absurd, obviously Andy Samberg sort of comedy way. He's playing this like bad boy of tennis who's wearing like denim shorts to play tennis. Amazing cameos in this thing from Fred Armisen doing an amazing like British stiff upper lip kind of accent. You got people like David Copperfield, Howie Mandel. John Hamm is the narrator of this thing, and I just think this thing is absolutely hilarious. I mean, Samberg is amazing. There's just so many great bits. One early on where he kills a man by serving the ball too fast, and is like just one of my favorite line deliveries in this thing is after he has killed this person, and the commentator is like, all right, second serve now, after killing a man. It is just perfectly, like, absurd and ridiculous and funny. You also have, like, Michael Sheen as, like, the, this, like talk show host kind of thing, who is just amazing and absolutely hilarious and really just, like, hamming it up. Kit Harington's also really funny. Obviously, you know, he's constantly saying indubitably. It's the only thing he knows how to say. I also just love, there's a really amazing bit where he like slowly explains the rules of tennis to someone, where they're like, oh, so how does, you know, you're such a prodigy, you're so amazing, like how does it work? Like how do you do what you do? And he's like, well, I serve the ball to him, and then he tries to hit it back to me, and it goes on like that. I think it's absolutely hilarious. It's so absurd. It is like it maybe doesn't have as much humanity as the guest mockumentary, but it's absolutely absurd. Just the image of this like tennis match that, as they explain in the documentary, there are no ties in tennis. Like someone has to win, but of course the rule in tennis, you have to win by 2 points. Just amazing the fact that they like at the beginning show that they've been going for like 102 to 103 is like the score. And yeah, just so many amazing bits. There's a amazing, like one of the funniest bits is when just Samberg just like has sex with someone on the tennis court while everyone like watches, and then he does it like multiple times. It just goes on and on. Yeah, I love it. I think Andy Samberg is just absolutely hilarious. I love him. I love this being a mockumentary about tennis specifically. And yeah, I think everyone should watch it. It's very short, obviously. Yeah, I mean, Thomas, you have seen this. Yeah, like what do you think?
Yeah, I like 7 Days in Hell quite a bit. I mean, I've personally prefer the follow-up that they did toward the pharmacy, which I think is also very
I haven't
funny.
seen that one. Yeah, I should watch that one.
I mean, it's the same team as well, because we should
Right.
mention that they're written, both of them are written by a guy named Mary Miller, who has a lot of history as, like, he's been a King of the Hill writer and done some other stuff like that. But then Jake Sizamaski, I believe is his name, has been like has a lot of stuff with like Funny or Die. He directed like a bunch of those like Funny or Die videos, and then also did a couple for the SNL digital shorts that apparently Akiva Schaffer didn't direct as well. So like they're both people that like have a history with like kind of this this element of it. And I remember though 7 Days in Hell I think is very funny. I think particularly there's also someone you didn't mention who was also another SNL connection, Will Forte, as the guy who wrote the book about Andy Samberg's character is very funny. Karen Gillan also shows up in there, is very funny. Mary Steenburgen and June Squibb plays the Queen of England.
Yeah, who like flips him off because he's like, I hate this country, I hate all of you. Like just an amazing bit that Sandberg has is like, there's no hot chicks. Like I've seen like one or two, but they're sixes at best. And if you not even six, if you put them in like L.A. or Miami or even San Francisco, like yeah, just.
Yeah. Though I do also credit the fact that they only did like 2 of these. They didn't like keep going with this necessarily for too long. They kind of like did 2 and then they were done, which I feel is like probably the smarter thing to do with this kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah. But you could easily like, I could see Andy Samberg as like, I don't know, a baseball player or just like, there's just put Andy Samberg in like any sort of context like that. And it's hilarious. But the fact that it is like tennis and specifically Wimbledon, which is like the most kind of like, obviously it's British, so it's very rigid about like, tradition and stuff like that, is like, it is just like amazing given like Sandberg's like type of comedy specifically.
Well, I guess there were kind of like successors as well, because there were also some of like the Netflix specials. Like speaking of baseball, there was like the Bash Brothers thing, which was a Netflix special.
Yeah.
That's there. But also my favorite of those is the Michael Bolton Valentine's Day special, which is so absurd. Do you know even what this is?
No, I don't think so.
So Michael Bolton, obviously very well known for his collaboration with like the Lonely Island guys, did a special with like that Akiva Schaffer directed and like Lonely Island produced that Sandberg is in, where the whole premise of it is that like Santa comes to Michael Bolton and it's just like, oh, I've run out of children to give presents to. You have to make sure that more children are conceived so that they could be born around Christmas and I can give presents. And Michael Bolton's like, well, that means I would have to make sure they were conceived around Valentine's Day. So he does a special to get people in the mood to procreate. It's so good. Michael Sheen's also amazing in that. He has like a whole bit where he plays kind of like a Bob Fosse style like choreographer who's very like serious and like starts like throwing chairs around and shit. Very good. That's probably my favorite version of one of these. But 7 Days in Hell, still very funny for sure. Well, by contrast, Brian, I am recommending it's a more traditional narrative film, but it does star another graduate of that 84 to 85 season of SNL, that one season, Martin Short, in a movie called Inner Space, which isn't technically a Martin Short specific vehicle. It's a bit more of a two-hander. This is a film from 1987, directed by Joe Dante, of Gremlins and other great genre films fame. And the premise of this is there's this pilot character, Tuck Pendleton, played by Dennis Quaid, who signs up to, like, after he's kind of retired from being a pilot, he signs up for this experiment where they're going to shrink him down inside of this vehicle and put him in a syringe and then inject that syringe into a rabbit to kind of test this, like, shrinking technology and see about, like, oh, you can perform, like, medical procedures and stuff. But during the process of the syringe ends up getting stolen to be sold off to like a different kind of a scientific engineering division. And in the process of doing this, the testing facility is like in a mall. And one of the henchmen for this rival company, played by Vernon Wells of like the Mad Max movies, has a syringe and he accidentally bumps into this grocery store clerk who's shopping around the mall, played by Martin Short, who ends up getting injected with Dennis Quaid inside of that little ship mechanism. So Martin Short has Dennis Quaid stuck in his body, and it's basically about just like the two of them communicate about like, hey, you have to get me to this specific place, and it's like Martin Short basically getting caught into, once again, he's like a Safeway grocery store clerk, and he has to like get involved in this like scientific like espionage plot. I think it's an incredibly funny movie. It's one of my favorite of like Joe Dante's. I'm a big Joe Dante fan in general, but I think this is an incredible sci-fi comedy that just utilizes Dennis Quaid very well. I'm very hot or cold on Dennis Quaid in general, but I think he's very funny in this movie. Mainly playing off, of course, Martin Short, who's like a when's he ever not funny kind of guy. Just like one of the funniest people who's ever lived in any sphere of things, and he especially has to do a lot of like physical stuff. Where there's some incredible visual effects that won this movie an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, by the way. Where he's like got like Dennis Quaid stuck in there, and there's this whole like thing where if like he's stuck in it, if Dennis Quaid's stuck in there too long, like he might like burst out of Martin Short kind of thing. So it's like a ticking clock kind of element, and there are points where he kind of like jitters around and his face kind of like puffs up and stuff. Also, I should mention Meg Ryan is in the cast of this movie as Dennis Quaid's love interest.
Oh.
And very notably, this is the movie where they met, and they ended up getting married shortly thereafter. And so you have this movie to thank for Jack Quaid in an interesting way. But I mean, there's a lot of other like wonderful people in here. You've got Kevin McCarthy from Invasion of the Body Snatchers, who was in like every other Joe Dante movie. He's very funny. Henry Gibson, who we talked about for Blues Brothers. Robert Picardo, who plays an assassin called the Cowboy, who dresses up like a cowboy. It's very funny. Just a lot of like really funny. Of course, a Joe Dante movie. There's a lot of cameos as well. Like Chuck Jones pops up in here, stuff like that. I think it's just incredibly fun, incredibly silly, but at the same time, incredible craft. Like I mentioned, the visual effects in this movie are so stellar and incredibly like sweet. Even like there's a scene where Dennis Quaid ends up in Meg Ryan's body, and I won't spoil what like the what that leads to, but it's a very like emotionally heartfelt bit that you can't really, it feels very unique to the sci-fi situation as well. It's just incredible stuff, incredibly fun movie. I think a movie that I know you haven't seen, Brian. I think it would be right up your alley as a sci-fi fan and a Martin Short fan, I assume.
Yeah, well, the thing with Martin Short is I am not as familiar with a lot of his earlier stuff. I've obviously, I think, mainly come to appreciate him from like, what's that show called? Only Murders in the Building.
Only Murders in the Building.
Yeah,
Right.
where I like, when I watched the first couple seasons of that show, I thought like, oh, Martin Short and Steve Martin are the funniest people who have ever lived. Got it. Like that's, and he is also in one of my favorite movies of all time, maybe Inherent Vice, the Paul Thomas Anderson movie.
Yes.
Amazing role. But yeah, I am not as familiar with Joe Dante's filmography, unfortunately. I like obviously have seen the Gremlins movies, but other than that, I haven't really seen any other one. I haven't really dived into his movies that much, but sounds insane. I feel like, is this the movie that like I feel like a lot of like cartoons and shows do the thing of like, I remember like Jimmy Neutron had an episode where like they went inside someone's body like because they were really tiny, and like is that from this?
No, I mean before this, the more famous one is Fantastic Voyage, like the 50s movie.
Oh, sure.
Which,
Okay.
Like has like which this movie's very much riffing on. This feels very much like it's indebted, like in the way that Joe Dante loves old sci-fi movies.
Right.
It's very much
okay.
kind of like playing on that element of it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm very intrigued. Dennis Quaid, I find to be such a fascinating person, and I love Meg Ryan. I think she's just absolutely amazing. And interestingly, like I've been watching the trailer in the background here on mute, and it's Steven Spielberg presents Inner Space.
Yes.
Which is
it's an Amblin film. Yes.
Yeah, this is 87, so like right at the height of Spielberg as a producer and stuff. So yeah, I'm really curious, especially because of I'm not as familiar with Martin Short's like earlier movies to watch some of these. But yeah, I'm very, very intrigued by this.
Well, on that note, we should go ahead and repeat our titles in case anybody wants to put them on their watch list, Brian.
Yes, I had the 2015 HBO sports short film, 7 Days in Hell, directed by Jake Szymanski with Andy Samberg.
Maybe a special, Brian. This movie
Special,
is
that's
a
better.
TV special.
Yeah.
Perhaps. Yes. But I had the feature film Inner Space, directed by Joe Dante, featuring SNL veteran that you wouldn't even think is an SNL veteran technically, Martin Short. Who, by the way, him and Steve Martin have hosted many times in SNL, and particularly the most recent time the two of them hosted is one of the funnier episodes of recent memory. Very funny dual hosting, which rarely happens, but you gotta do it for the two of them. And also, Steve Martin, the most recurring SNL host, I think. Well, it's him and Alec Baldwin kind of share that record. Yeah. Well, on that note, let's go ahead and wrap up the show here, but we want to thank some people as we leave. We want to thank Burial Grid for our music for the show. Purchase music at burialgrid.com. Thanks to Michelle Kyle for our artwork. Find her at MishKyle96 over on Twitter. And thanks to our Patreon supporters at patreon.com/cinema2letter, where for just $1 a month, you all get access to bonus stuff, like you get to vote in polls, which, put a pin in that, we'll talk about that a bit later in the show, in terms of a poll you all get to vote on. But also you get access to bonus audio that we put out, including, this episode's coming out in May, but we would have, around the time we're recording this, just recorded and released our March Madness for Best Action Sequences, which you get a bang for your buck if you go for that one, because we've recorded that, and it ended up being about 5 hours and 43 minutes long, and as, hopefully the longest thing we'll ever record. But you can listen to that and hear, Bryan, myself, Marcelo Pico, Siobhan Irving, and Shaquille Lambert go insane.
Yeah, that's a great way to sell it, actually. It is us going insane.
Yeah, truly. It's a madhouse out there. We also would have put out our Final Destination full franchise, where we covered at least the first 5 movies in that franchise, which will be leading up to an audio review for Final Destination Bloodlines, which will be coming out in a couple weeks as of when this episode's coming out. But also, we do like to do audio review stuff, which, we'll be having a break here, but we'll definitely be covering a bunch of, other big summer movies over the course of this. And we've also put out recently our Sinners audio review, but I'm sure Brian will be, the summer movie season's going to be starting at the time this is putting out, so, there's plenty of just great stuff that we'll want to cover.
Like a Minecraft movie.
Well, that would come out in spring. That was
shit,
already the biggest movie of spring. Right, we've both seen it multiple times in theaters, I'm sure. It's become like the Barbie. It's both a Barbie and an Oppenheimer in and of its own right. Right, just combined. We are Legion, we are Minecraft moving. And then also in May, the big bonus podcast that we'll be covering, a Muppet-related thing. I think I've decided, Brian, that I want to do a bit of a Muppet Show retrospective. I want to, get a couple episodes for you to watch. You haven't seen any of that. So I think that'll be interesting to kind of look back on, especially as we celebrate 70 years of the Muppets in May. We won't do the entire catalog. I'll just select a couple episodes. I'm not gonna have you watch, all fucking
24-hour
episodes or whatever. No.
Muppets Marathon.
No, we're not doing that necessarily, but we'll have a selection of episodes for sure for you to watch. And then just also a bit of a peek, speaking of, Muppets and some of that stuff, in June, we're planning on doing a bit of a little theme park excursion. No, we're not going to Epic Universe, which will be opening soon at the time of this recording. We're not foolhardy to, go to that during its first month of existence, because those crowds will be fucking insane. We're planning on going to somewhere else, maybe more on the Disney side of things, and give Brian a bit, because I know you've been to Universal, but have you ever been to the Disney parks before, Brian?
I have, but I was very, very young, and I do not remember it that much, really. So.
Okay. Well, we'll be taking Brian out of his comfort zone, taking him to a big theme park, and we'll have, a little audio thing, I'm sure, about that, and some other things. So that's all on the Patreon for just either the $1 to become a cineast every month. You just pay the $1. Or if you want to buy an individual piece of audio like the March Madness or some of these other things, you can do that for $3 for just one individual audio. That's the lowest price I can give, given Patreon fees and stuff. But that's all over there. Once again, patreon.com/cinema2letter. And for more of us, you can find us, at whatever hell site at cinema2letter. We'll be there. And to find more of me specifically, I'm usually over at Blue Sky and Letterboxd as at Not the Who's Tommy, and also occasionally I do some writing at film-cred.com.
Yeah, and you can also follow me on Blue Sky if you would like at BryanDrade and the number 3. Or you can just follow me on Letterboxd, just at my name, where I'm actually active. So yeah, follow me on that if you would like.
And, for more of us, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or other podcasting platforms. If you're listening on Talk Film Society, why not listen to all the other great shows that are on the network? You can also dig into the archives on our Podbean main feed for, the past, several seasons of this show, and also all the old double-edged double bill stuff is all there. And everything else you can to support us on the Patreon, that's cool. Money can be tight for some people, but the free way to help us out is to rate, review, or simply share the show around to give us more visibility out there so we can get ourselves a big blue ribbon for podcasting. This is what we really want out there. The big blue ribbon. Parade us around. On that note, we'll tease, like I mentioned, we're going to be taking a break. We'll be back later in the summer for our upcoming season, which we should note, Bryan, is our 10th season of the show. And we'll be coming up on the 2-year anniversary as well of us starting Cinema to the Letter. So we decided for this auspicious occasion to leave the decision of what our next season will be to our Cineast patrons. If you're listening to this on the day it comes out, the next day on May 7th, Wednesday, May 7th, Cineast will get a chance to vote between which topic we cover for season 10. And Bryan and I both have suggestions for you to choose from. My choice is movies about movies. So basically movies that are about either the making of movies or about people watching movies, which I figured would be an interesting kind of season 10 topic to cover. And then Bryan, what topic are you bringing for people to vote on?
Yeah, so to contrast that, I still wanted to have it be, what we typically have done, which is, genres and kind of a type of movie. This is not a genre. This is a medium, but...
You're goddamn right, because Brad Bird will fucking kill you.
He's pointing a gun at me when I said that. It was crazy. Animation. It is my category. I think it would be really fun to cover entirely animated movies. That's such a wide spectrum of types of movies. We can do the typical, kind of classical 2D animation, claymation, CGI, other kinds of, weird stuff. That would be a really cool one just to kind of contrast, give two kind of equally interesting options that, would be quite different, I think.
And both ones we've definitely discussed doing at some point on the show. And just kind of held off because of other things. But yeah, either one, I think we'd be very, very keen on talking about for sure. We have no biases, but vote for movies about movies, guys.
I'm okay with either.
Yeah, honestly, okay with either. But like I said, you have to become a patron over at patreon.com/cinema2letter. You can vote, like I said, tomorrow, and the poll will be up for a couple days after this comes out, so we can start planning after that. But yeah, so it's in your hands, Cineast. You all get to choose what our big first foray into a double-digit season and our second anniversary season is the topic for. So you all get to decide, choose. You really help shape the show, and we really appreciate that. But that is the end here, Bryan. And on that note, I have to announce that the winner of the Best in Show podcast is your terrier, Bryan. You won! You won!
Cookie!
Jerry, we did it! We did it! Those 2 left feet didn't impede you at all, Bryan. Finally, we can reveal. That's the big reveal at the end of the season. You have 2 left feet.
Oh,